very good afternoon to you, our cherished listeners. It's always very, very exciting to come your way every Wednesday with your favorite business development program on radio, Masterclass. Masterclass is powered by Joy Business and brought to you by Goyle. Goyle, they say good energy. Goyle, Yenara, Yendia. Like we always say here on the show, if there's something you want to do, something you want to start that you haven't started, by all means do start, because it's better to start late than never to start at all. Our prayer, as has always been here on the show, is that God bless our homeland Ghana and definitely make our nation great and strong. And on this note, we bring you today's edition of Masterclass. Masterclass comes your way every Wednesday at 1:15 p.m. and runs all the way through to 2 p.m. here on your superstation, Joy 99.7. My name is Yabanafo, and I am your host. In the last couple of weeks, we've been spending time, 4 weeks I think it's been, today's the 5th week, we've been spending time in the studio talking about sexual harassment in the workplace and its effect on productivity. It's been an interesting discussion, but rather unfortunately or sadly, we have to bring that discussion to a close today. So we'll try and get as much in as possible. I'm hopeful that sometime during the year, perhaps my producers will bring back this discussion again. But on today's show, we want to be able to open the phone lines early. We'll have a conversation as early as possible in the show. We want you to be a part of it as we round up today's discussion. We've also got a few more stories that we will share and try and discuss to be able to bring to the fore what some of the real challenges are as to why people do not even talk about it or report it, or should I say not many people report it. We've been spending time in the studio with Senor Ajabing, who's a labor consultant and an HR practitioner, and also with Kwame Boafo, who was with us last week. Today we're joined by a third resource person, personal friend of mine. He is also an HR person, practiced HR for many years. He's currently at Barclays Bank. He's in charge of, he says it's not HR, he says people and culture function. He's in charge of people and culture function, the person of Mr. William Ismon, and he's with us here on the show. So I've got three strong panelists today. We'll be talking about the issue of sexual harassment, trying to round that discussion up. And in our discussion today, we'll be looking essentially at, where to get help. Last week we started that discussion, who to talk to. People talked about the fact that, sometimes the HR managers that they have are unable to help. Where else do you get help? What is the role of SHRAJ in all of this? Are there some statistics we can share? Is there also malicious reporting? That's something that we haven't been able to touch on. While we're talking about this issue of harassment, sometimes we also understand that opinion is divided when it comes to this discussion. So there's a fair percentage of those who are harassed, those who are not harassed, those who say they are harassed when they are not, and all of that. Today we'll be spending some time to talk about it. Time check in the studio, 18 minutes past the hour of 1, and we'll be going straight into our discussion for today. Just a quick shout out to Adjoa Etidadzi. Adjoa, you've been listening to this show today. Pick up the phone and give us a call. By all means, we want you to also be a part of this discussion. Gentlemen, you're welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Right. So let me just share two brainy quotes, or should I say opinions, that I gathered. I think I shared this last week on the show, where it comes to harassment. This one is from Mo Ibrahim. Mo Ibrahim is a Sudanese-British billionaire and businessman. And he says that intimidation, harassment, and violence have no place in a democracy. And this is Mo Ibrahim. There's also one from, this one is interesting. This one is from Marianne Barry. Marianne Barry is an attorney, U.S. attorney and circuit court judge. Marianne says, every sexy joke of long ago, every flirtation is now recalled by some women, or should I say some victims, and revised and reevaluated as sexual harassment. Frivolous accusations reduce, if not only eliminate, communication between men and women. And they also go ahead to reduce any kind of playfulness or banter. Where has the laughter gone? That's Marianne Barry. Sherry is a Malaysian entrepreneur and also an angel investor. Sherry says, when there is an incident reported, HR almost always starts from a position of disbelief. They request for evidence and ask for proof. But if HR is investigating a sexual harassment case within a company, it is their duty to protect their employees. That is the sentiment that has to shift. That's my cherry. You should see the faces of my panelists in the studio. Gentlemen, I'll give you the chance to react very shortly. We're also live on Facebook. We're streaming. Go to our Facebook page. We're streaming live. You can also join us on Facebook. This one is from Celeste. Celeste is also Celeste NG. She's an American writer. She says that, and she's famous for this book. She says her novel is Everything I Never Told You. Everything I Never Told You. It was Amazon Book of the Year for 2014 also. And Celeste says, if you see harassment happening, speak up. Being harassed is terrible. But having bystanders pretend that they don't notice what is happening is infinitely worse. Infinitely worse. Gentlemen, once again, you're welcome to the show. Senor, it's good to have you back.
Thank you.
We missed you last week.
Yes.
William, you are new on the panel today, so I'll give you the first bite. We're rounding up the discussion today. We've talked about sexual harassment, what it is, what it's not, how it happens, in what forms it does. Senor even helps us understand that the workplace, differs for everyone. So for the truck driver, his workplace is the station. For the domestic staff, his workplace is the home. For the nurse, for the teacher, and all of that. We've been trying to find out why people don't talk as often. And I've spoken to a few people myself. My panelists have also done that. It's because of a certain lack of trust for the system that exists. Mr. Boafo spent time last week helping us understand that there are systems in place. It starts from the policy in the workplace. Yeah. How strong is the policy? How strong are the systems? Senor, you spent time talking about whistleblowers policy and all of that. In your experience, Mr. Ismon, share some thoughts with us very briefly on why it's difficult for people to report. Very briefly, just.
Well,
yeah.
I think it goes even wider than that. It goes into the society itself, in which we find ourselves. So, assuming Mr. Ismon goes to report that I've been harassed, society has a way of saying, you as a man, you're being harassed by a lady. How can you do that? Pick it from the female point of view. There is the whole family system, which kind of wants to shy away from the limelight. And so the society in which we are also has a way of deterring people from reporting. The culture around us also has a way of deterring people from reporting, because people look beyond just themselves and look at the family name. So it goes around to say that, it is this person's daughter who's been harassed. People want to protect their family. People want to protect stigma, exactly. So they won't go out. So it goes just beyond the policies and the opportunities to report into the wider societal norms and culture that we have.
I'll come back to you on where else we can find help very, very briefly. But Senor, we've talked about, people being reluctant to report for various reasons. And I'll give you two extreme examples on the extreme side. So let's say there's the superior who's harassing the subordinate. Last week we read someone's story here. It was a gentleman who was being harassed by a female boss. Great example. We have two more stories we're going to read today. So there's the superior being harassed by the junior being harassed by the senior, and there's also the senior being harassed by the junior.
Yes.
Would their reluctance to report differ? See, William talks about the reluctance to report from the junior being, amongst many other things, stigma and the fact that you're probably going to lose your job in the end, they're going to victimize you and all of that. But where you are the senior, and let's say, there was a caller last week who spoke about the fact that in an educational system, teachers are harassed by students. And it's embarrassing for them as female teachers, what would be the reason for their reluctance? And how would they get help? In her case, she reported to the headmaster, it went to administration, disciplinary committee, the guy apologized and all of that. So we'll come to how they can get help, but what would their reluctance differ from the first example?
Certainly. The reluctance would differ because normally sexual harassment or perpetrators of sexual harassment do that from a position of power. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So even if it's a junior who is harassing a senior, there almost always is a psychological effect of some power play along the line. Under those circumstances, then the senior would use the structures of power at their disposal to try to deal with it. Either they'll tell another senior who would then take it up, etc., etc. So that is easier. But where the senior being harassed is in a structure that makes it difficult for juniors to be penalized, especially, for example, as it is existent in some public sector organizations, then it becomes difficult for the senior to even use the internal structures to get help. Mm-hmm. And at those circumstances, then they may be forced to use external facilities to do that, like the Shrajes, like the Labour Commission, etc., etc. And at those circumstances, they would hardly take on the junior that is harassing them, but they would take on the organization.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
So all these dynamics, happen in these things.
But on the latter side, though, do you think that, for example, people would, let's say in that case where a junior was harassing a senior, the reluctance would come from a form of fear to be unable to prove that you, the senior, are being harassed by a junior? I'm not sure how to put this correctly. So, for example, they'll say something like, "Ukakake, are you saying that this person is harassing you?"
It's also possible.
So then it comes back to the cultural issue that William is talking
Exactly.
about.
So the fear of stigmatization that you've been backing at people, you, this hard woman in this organization, or this hard man, then it is this small person that is doing this for you. You can't do any, stuff like that.
And I want to Jamaupe. Because you see, these are some of the questions that some.
You will most likely get people writing it off. I mean, where Dudu was saying, maybe a growing only the Tiano,
exactly.
he will stop or she will stop. He or she doesn't mean any harm. So in that context, like Senyo said, I think it becomes a little more difficult for the senior,
to deal with
getting believed that even the issue is there. Whereas that when it is a subordinate complaining, there is a likelihood that that person may be believed, but the extent of the belief is going to be dependent on what did you do to contribute to the incident happening in the first place.
Wow, that is a legitimate question. Why does that always seem to come up in cases like that? What did you go and do in his room?
Well,
it's your fault that it happened to you. You are to blame for it.
Yeah.
Why does that come up?
Okay. William talked about that, and it's called victim blaming, The moment the incident happens, the first point is that the perpetrator is alleged to be innocent and that he or she may have been baited by an act on the part of the victim. It runs through rape, it runs through almost every harassment incident that you find. I mean, we talk about R. Kelly, Cosby and all, and no matter how graphic the narration is, there are still people who believe that, but if you have not done this, it does not justify the act. But unfortunately, that is how, issues of harassment, rape, and sexual harassment indeed are looked at. That the victim, which is what we spoke about, that the onus of proof then shift heavily on the victim to be able to establish that he or she was the innocent party in that, and that whatever happened was as a result of somebody exercising undue force, influence, or power in a way that's sexually that we talk about.
So to add, for education, that is why we insist that this is the bad way of handling sexual harassment. That should shift. Because if it doesn't, then it is handled lightly and then the organization gets into trouble.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Okay, gentlemen, let's go straight to redress. You talked about policy. Sam, very briefly. Let's start with the policy of the organization. I think, Senor, you talked about it last week as well. Let's start with that. Then, William, we'll come back to you of other ways of dealing with it, because people need to know that they can get help. I have some stories I want to share today as well. If you've just tuned in, you're live on your superstation Joy 99.7. This is Masterclass, and we're discussing sexual harassment in the workplace. How do you get help? Sam?
Yeah, we talk about policy in place in any organization to deal with this issue, because one, the absence or lack of it opens you up to all manner of suits, or if you like, legal issues, because there isn't anything to define and guide people in their conduct day to day. So the policy being in place will spell out, define exactly what harassment is, what harassment is not. as well as provide guidelines on how cases that are reported ought to be handled, the role of the supervisors, the role of management, and then the role of the individuals in how to handle cases of that nature. So the policy bit is not just necessarily to have something in your books that says that you have a policy that it is not. No, it will clearly state exactly what individual party is required to do, and when the case happens, how it's supposed to be handled. In some cases, with specific timelines. Again, it's also ensuring that what Senor spoke about is also captured in policy, that any victim, any individual who reports the case is provided assurances of safety, if you like, anonymity, if it is possible, confidentiality, in order for that person to feel safe and secure to even go into deeper details on a matter of that nature. Don't forget that we also said that people who go through this issue go through a lot of psychological and emotional trauma. So the measures that you put in place, if they are not geared towards helping them deal with that pain or the emotional discomfort that they are going through, it makes it difficult for people to even to come up. And all these issues have to be captured and emphasized in policy, the role and measures that the organization will put in place to support people who have that one. Again, we talk about also that, malicious reporting.
I'll come to that.
All right.
But, before we talk about malicious reporting, William, let me come to you.
Yeah.
I've been talking to a few people, during the week about this subject, male, female alike. 8 out of 10 women, and this is not scientific, but I'm just saying, 8 out of 10 women would have gone through one form of harassment or the other. Okay, and this is from all the people I spoke with. So they've come to adapt. And I say women because statistically they are the most harassed.
Yes.
They are in the majority.
Yes.
They've come to accept and also understand that the system does not help as much as it should. And I'm sorry if it's putting you guys on the spot, gentlemen, but somebody spoke about the HR and saying that, look, the policy you are talking about is a policy of the company. The board chairman, for this example, is the one who is doing the thing. The policy is like they say, the law is in the bosom of the judge. The policy is in the bosom of the company. Where is there a connection external of the organization which can give confidence to a victim to say, look, if I'm going to do this, they're not going to quash it. They're not going to ask me for evidence and throw it out and say, because last week's example we read, the guy went to HR. HR said, go and bring evidence. His boss has been hitting on him. Guy, for donkeys. He goes to his computer and conversation they've been having for over a year, not a trace on the server. All the emails have disappeared. HR also is protecting his job. Where do people get confidence in this policy that Sam is talking about?
So a lot again comes back this time to the organizational culture. What is leadership's posture when it comes to issues of sexual harassment? That's one. Number two, yes, you may have the policies, but what other remedies are available? Do you have, for instance, a whistleblowing team that sits outside the organization? Do you have, for instance, clinical psychologists services that sit outside the organization? These are like independent people that you can go to share your frustrations if you can't trust the systems. The other part is that we usually see unions as antagonistic to management and to the organization. But I see them as a great resource when it comes to issues, dealing with issues of sexual harassment. They are there for the people, for the colleagues. You could use that route to report lots of these, and it will be dealt with because I trust the unions are there for the colleagues. In my organization, for instance, we also have gender-based groups. So we have a women's network forum headed by a director who is, strong when it comes to issues of women empowerment and all that. That is one avenue you can use. All these boil down.
Is there a men's group?
There is a men's zone.
Okay.
There is a men's zone.
I just wanted to create the balance.
Yes, so there is a men's zone which also deals with this.
Right.
So it all boils down to, yes, you may have the policies, but what other supporting instruments do you have in there that would help reassure victims that if this area, okay, HR, I don't have trust in HR, I can go to the men's zone or the WNF, or I can go to the union chairman, or I can go to the labor commission, or go to the clinical psychologist to deal with all this. Or push comes to shove, whistle blow, and this goes to an external body that comes to do the
So it comes back to
investigation.
the point that we are saying that staff within any organization, within the environment, must first of all know whether there is a policy existent to cater for them in cases like this.
So there is the awareness bit,
right,
which we must keep driving. We should understand again that the issue of sexual harassment is now gaining ground. You
mean the reportage of it?
10, 15 years ago, we didn't have this as on top of the radar. But now it's coming up. And so we have issues where, back in America, what's happened to Cosby and all that. 20 years ago, it wasn't an issue. So what we think may not be an issue today, give it 10 years. It will become an issue.
Because of evolution.
And people will refer to those times when these things were happening.
Senor, talk to me about same-sex harassment. First of all, are there any examples you're aware of? And what do you think that victims in that circumstance have a more difficult time than victims of cross-sexual harassment?
Yes, there are examples, but
Do you think the shock is greater if a guy groped a guy in a washroom as
Yes.
opposed to if,
Yes, but the feelings of the victim or the emotions or the trauma they go through is the same. It's the same shock, And for same-sex harassment, it's a lot more sensitive because it's an area of our lives that normally we are not comfortable with.
Yes.
Okay. For example, if it happens between two guys, sometimes it can become bloody because the victim can then, if he has the opportunity to be able to beat the other guy, you find two workers fighting in the organization, you want to penalize both of them, but you go into it and you find there is some harassment undertones.
I'll share a quick story with you. Quick story, and it's not part of what I'm going to read today. By the way, if you've just tuned in, this is Masterclass. You can send us your comments on 0244 340 437. We're discussing sexual harassment in the workplace and its effects on productivity. We're rounding up our discussion today, so send us your comments or your questions. We'll be opening the phone lines at some point. Quick story, Senor. So in a certain organization in a certain planet outside of this world, a senior staff goes to the washroom and meets a junior staff and thinks that the washroom has not been kept well by various users. So sees the junior staff doing his business and thinks that he's not close enough to the urinary pot. So he's all over the place. And I don't know what gets into his mind. He says that he wants to teach this guy a lesson that you can't mess up the place and somebody will clean it. So he grabs the guy and says, do the right thing. You are not doing the right thing. And the guy is scandalized. And he runs all the way to the HR. And this is a junior staff who, on a normal day, will not speak back. And he's crying, he's sweating,
Exactly.
and he won't stop
Because
talking.
he's been-
And everybody's saying, calm down. He says, I won't keep quiet. I won't keep quiet. He touched me.
Because he's been sexually assaulted. Okay.
That's when you move from the harassment.
Exactly.
Even
You've
if it is
moved
one
into
He's in a different...
an
it's a
abuse.
physical touch.
You
Yeah.
have to touch
And
the
that
person.
becomes criminal.
Yeah.
You don't have to touch.
Okay.
Yeah.
That becomes criminal. So these things have thin lines between them.
Right.
So you find that the victims go through certain serious emotional trauma that you cannot quantify. And it happens to each person differently. And that is why it's so important for the workplace not only to have the policy, but to make sure that workers are aware. People are so aware of the whole policy that anybody can tell you what it is and what you should not do. And under those circumstances, then management or the organization must also take affirmative action to protect itself from being accused of aiding and abetting the process in the workplace.
Right. I'm going to be going for a quick break very soon, but Senor, talk to me about malicious reporting.
So malicious reporting basically is about mischievousness where for a person's own interest wants to use a policy or a structure to get back at someone. Okay, so it is a personal interest, it's a personal vendetta. So you find often that there's no truth in it. So when investigations are held, you find you don't find anything. Now, it's very tricky because it's a thin line. At what point can you tell whether somebody is
This
being
report is malicious
or not? Now, but in malicious reporting, you would always find certain undertones relationally. The relationship between the people in the past would have given certain indicators. Once you start seeing that, then your investigation has to be a bit broader to take account of possible maliciousness. And indeed, in every harassment investigation, the first thing you want to get out of the way, which you disprove, is the malicious part. That this is not just frivolous. You need to deal with it and get it out of the way first before you can go on to the other areas of...
So if malicious, let's say, reportage does occur, would that not be the reason why questions like bring me evidence, show me this, let's talk about the motive, and all of those things, even though it's uncomfortable for the victim, it's important, like you're saying, to be able to eliminate at a very early stage of the investigation?
Yes, but you see, the right phraseology would not be bring me evidence.
Exactly.
We will we'll work on this together. We will find the evidence if it exists. We'll work through this together. That is the way an HR person or an organization, an officer of organization, a trained individual to handle sexual harassment reportage. Because if you don't do that, you shift the blame onto the person and the remedy onto the person. You are not taking affirmative action. And at those circumstances, you become liable. Assuming the person does not decides not to use the internal process and goes outside, then it is that person against the organization and the perpetrator.
If I'm not comfortable to use my organization as a channel of redress, where else can I go?
Well,
anyone can take that.
I think that on the show we've outlined a couple of avenues.
Let's just rehash them again.
We talk about the option of STRAJ, which is a constitutionally mandated body to look at issues of administrative justice and injustice. And then there are also most organizations now are establishing whistleblowing policies that allows you to go to third party, to be able to file complaints of that nature. Is there?
So find out who your whistleblower is for your company.
Exactly. And these are matters that we talk about, that if the policy is in place and is educated, people will know who to go to.
Right.
And my interest in all this is also making sure that the victim receive that first line support in terms of who I go to. How will this person handle me? Am I going to be made to feel that I am the cause of this? So the way of counselors and all those things is getting people who understand that issue and can provide guidance and direction on, managing. Because it's important to emphasize that the effect on the victim becomes cyclical. See, I come to work, I'm unable to maintain that emotional balance to do my work. I get home, I also tend to affect people at home because I'm unable to get to do things that I'm expected to do at home. I create problems at home. It makes the place home also very hostile. I come back into the organization and I'm also in the middle of it. So problems here, problems there.
And I can't talk to anyone about
exactly.
it.
And that is why it's very important that aspect is handled by people who have been trained or organizations who have been trained and understand the importance of being able to establish the line between malicious reporting and a genuine case that requires further attention.
We're going to be looking at some case studies in a few minutes, and while we do that, we'll also be opening the phone lines shortly. But before we do that, we will go for a quick break. When we come back, we'll open the phone lines right after this.
The masterclass is in session, and you can interact with us via Facebook at Joy Business or at Joy 99.7 FM. And if you tweet, the handle is at Joy 997 FM. Don't forget to hashtag masterclass. You can also send us a text on 1422 across all networks, or join the WhatsApp conversation on 0244 340437, and our facilitators will address your concerns. Attention everyone, class is in progress.
Right. If you just tuned in, this is Masterclass right here on your superstation. We're discussing sexual harassment in the workplace. And with me here in the studio, we have our favorite panelist for this discussion, Senyo Ajabing. He's back, Mr. Samuel Kwame Boafo from CalBank, Head Human Resources. And we also have Mr. William Ismon, who has joined us today. He's Head of People and Culture Function at Barclays Bank. If you own any vehicle of any kind, here's some good news for you. Goil's new super synthetic 5W20 and 5W30 loops are the best engine oils for your vehicle. They are specially engineered engine oils which efficiently work on all your modern petrol and diesel engines. They clean, they protect, they reduce fuel consumption, they prolong oil change intervals, and they enhance your engine performance right from when you start up to when you switch off. So go to any Goil filling station today and grab the new Goil Super Synthetic 5W20 and 5W30 engine oils for superior vehicle performance. Goil, they say good energy. Goil, Yenara, Yendia. William, just, before we went for the break, you were talking about another area where people can report. And this is the National Labour Commission.
Yes.
How does that happen? How does one get up and just go to the NLC?
Well, the NLC.
They just walk in and say, look, I have an issue. Somebody's XYZ.
You are allowed to do that.
You're allowed to do that.
Write.
Okay.
You can write to the NLC that this is the situation and that I would want to report. But basically, what happens is that this time it's not the individual versus someone in there, but it's the individual versus the organization.
Right.
So
Right.
now you're working for this organization. You're reporting this organization to the NLC.
It's all cumbersome, isn't it?
That's a whole different.
We'll come back to that.
ballgame.
Numbers to call 0302 216 541. That's 0302 216 541. Pick up that phone, give us a call. We're rounding up our discussion here. You've got some thoughts, some comments, some experiences to share, some questions to ask. We can make this discussion richer and better for those of our work colleagues who also have gone through this at one point or the other. So I have a story here I'd just like to share very quickly. Then guys, we can discuss it and chip in. This one I'm going to read quite fast because I'm running out of time. This one says, I work in one of the top hospitals in Accra. In the first 10 years of my career, I fought a constant battle with women who wanted more from me than my clinical attention. These female harassers included some of my patients, nurses I worked with, and students I taught. It was quite bad. When you are in a caring profession and you find yourself in this sort of fix, it is quite embarrassing. Of course, not every woman I interacted with wanted to go to bed with me, but quite a few did. I was alarmed that perhaps I was sending the wrong signals. How do you handle people nastily when they're in a vulnerable state and you are trying to make them feel better? Yet they're trying to make things very hard and take advantage of your politeness and indeed compromise your professional integrity. I must admit that some of it was very tempting and was hard to manage. It was all very subtle. They often posed as very helpless, so I had to give extra attention. The students often came to my office almost in tears as they found the class too hard. The patients were often desperate to get pregnant, or they were worried about breast cancer, and I had to have intimate conversations with them and examine their bodies often. Some of them reacted physically when I touched them in consulting rooms, which was very uncomfortable for me when they asked for my mobile number, and I did not know how to refuse. The nurses, well, I worked with them and they would unburden their worries on me. I had to confide in my wife. She really helped me. She often teased me that I was too good looking and caring for my own good. There were several pestering phone calls, and at a point I gave her my mobile phone so that she intercepted the calls and told the women off. Everything has settled down now. I am more mature and better at managing my female contacts. But believe me, many more men are harassed than we imagine, and they don't talk about it. Story number 2. 22-year-old, okay, my name is Yao, so I'll say Ya, okay. Ya, pseudonym, migrated to Accra from a place in Ghana in search of a job, and is a very good cook and can prepare a variety of Indian dishes. And though she's not a native of that country, as a well-cultured young lady who had to drop out of school to work to support the treatment of her ailing mother and to fund the education of younger siblings, she was poised and focused on working hard to make ends meet and to carve a niche for herself. Thankfully, Ya found a job with an Indian family to which she gave her all. Her virtue of paying attention to detail and ability to grasp new skills within minimum supervision from her madam made her an asset to the family. Her job description was to prepare 2 kids ready for school every morning, fix breakfast, lunch, and supper. Although her daily wage was X amount, which is below national minimum wage, she could not press for an increase because she was in dire need of an income to support her family. Mr. Kofi, the husband of the madam, became fond of Ya due to her hard work and perfectionism. At a point, this admiration got to a different level when Mr. Kofi started making advances that were suggestive of intimacy towards the young lady. He could not take his eyes off her and made advances that were so uncomfortable for her to the extent of touching her at times. She could not tell her madam about what was going on for fear of losing her job. But her madam suspected her husband's actions and caught him in the act one day, which ended up in a hot exchange. The unfortunate part of Ya's situation was that the engagement with the family was not formalized. So in the end, she lost her job. Ya's encounter is similar to the account of many domestic workers in our country today. 2 examples. I've got a caller on the line. Let's take the call. Good afternoon. You're welcome to Masterclass.
Yeah, good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Talk to me.
My name is Umusumo from Domade.
Right. Talk to me. Thank you for calling the show.
Thank you for the good work you are doing for Ghana.
Right.
You see, I also want to know, we are talking about sexual abuse or sexual harassment.
Yes.
But I also want to know if there's a law regarding to women or ladies who also harass guys in the name of their love to get money. Sometimes, they have proposed to them, so maybe give me money, give me this. And also dress in a way that they will frustrate guys, or they will intentionally do some things for guys to tag them and all that. If there is a law regarding to that, because sometimes, you see, some of the sexual harassment, if you go into it critically, you see that it's not like intentional something. It's because of the guy's action or is the lady's action that fall for that. So I want the woman to throw more light about it. Thank you.
Okay, please keep listening. There's no woman on my panel today. I'm not sure who they're referring to, but he has a question. William, do you want to take that? Okay, Senor. Oh, yeah.
Okay, Senor.
No, William, you take it.
Okay.
You are.
Okay, so there is no specific law about dressing and proposal
or asking somebody for money.
Money. There's no specific law against that, because asking for someone for money shouldn't, or even dressing shouldn't be the reason you give for harassing anyone. I mean, we are rational beings. Okay. We know what is right. We know what is wrong. Just do it.
Okay. Let's talk about the examples. I mean, while we wait for the next phone call. Let's talk about, so you can pick any of the stories and let's relate it to all the discussions we've had. Why didn't she report it? At what point did she say stop? Because I remember when you defined harassment, you said when the person says or gives you an indication, I do not want you to continue with this, and you continue beyond that point, it becomes harassment.
Yes.
So at any point, did either the medical guy or the domestic staff, did they say stop? Did the people not stop? Were they willing participants? Let's relate it to the discussions that we have had.
So you see, for me, let me take the domestic issue, because I'm a bit very passionate about that. Because of our weak social services.
Very briefly, yes.
Our weak social services systems, domestic workers don't seem to have that amount of protection that they need in their homes. And so they find themselves in all of these situations, and they don't know where to turn, because sometimes people don't even know that domestic workers are subject to the provisions of the labor law. Okay, so it becomes difficult to deal with these, and when the issue came out, you find that she lost her job.
She did.
Under those circumstances, somebody should have paid compensation for that. So she still has an avenue to be able to take this up.
To make a case.
To make a case and take it up if she wants to.
But the problem here was that she didn't have a contract.
Okay, William, you go ahead.
Yeah.
Sam, I'll come to you shortly.
So
yeah, but I think Senyor's point is that let's do the right thing.
Yes.
You didn't have a contract, but...
No, but you see, if you bring somebody into your home, in fact, the law says that contracts may be unwritten. Okay.
Written or written contracts.
Yes, unwritten. Okay. Or verbal. So if you bring somebody into your home with an understanding that the person is going to work for you as a help, that is a contract.
It's an
in
unwritten
itself.
contract.
So even if you don't write it, it is still considered under the Labour Act as a contract.
Sam, was the doctor harassed?
I mean, clearly, from all the accounts that are in there, point is that there are multiple people at play. Okay, so is it with one individual, different people? He outlined
made it clear that
different
there were
layers.
different.
There were clear cases of harassment. I do not know how the instance where the harassment happens, whether when he is alone with the patient or whether they follow him to a place where they find him and, but I'm saying that at every stage there could have been something that he would have done to reduce, for example, not being alone
in the consulting
room with a patient.
Yes.
If your nurse is sitting by you, there is less likelihood that anybody will be making passes at you in that case. Then again, he also said that the nurse. So I don't know whether it's the nurse who is assisting with consulting or a colleague nurse who is also going, because you see, I was reading
I'm
some
assuming that it was
statistics.
individuals at different points in time. So let's say nurse A, when you're alone, doctor, is there a patient? No, but I want to talk to you. Okay, come and talk to me. Da. And at that point, innuendos had dropped, subtle advances are made and all of that. So he had this experience repeatedly.
Yeah. In that case here, I would say it. In the context that you've been illustrated, a doctor and a nurse, I would expect that the doctor will be firm enough to say, you know what, stop this. I do not appreciate you talking to me in this way. And this is a company where it easily goes around. Even if she intended it to be a casual play, the moment he mentioned it out to somebody said, now what's one he's married.
Okay, so what we are saying here on the show is that if at any point you feel harassed,
speak up.
Speak up.
Yeah.
Say, I do not like what you are doing. Even if you are playing, I'm uncomfortable about it. Stop.
Yeah.
If they do not stop, we're saying that if you are in an organization, you can look at your policy, go and see what it says and get redress. If your policy does not help you, find out who the whistleblower for your institution is and talk to somebody else. Otherwise, go to SHRAJ or go to Labour Commission or find a lawyer.
Yes.
But you should be prepared to also lose your job. Yes? No?
Well, not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Yes, and I told you on the first day.
But you can be victimized.
You can be victimized,
Yes.
but by the time you are taking the action, you'll be protected by the law, because the labor law even says that you cannot terminate me by virtue of the fact that I've taken an action against you.
Super. William, 10 seconds, final words.
Okay, it's also important that organizations critically do organizational health checks, surveys, so that they get to know what's happening on the ground.
Within the
Because it's not
organization.
everyone who will come and say that this is what is happening. But anonymous surveys would help.
Okay. Sam, final words.
Well, statistics that I was just talking about, 81% of the people, a survey that was done in US, say that they have been touched or they have been harassed in one way that they did not like. These things are happening. Organizations need to open our eyes and deal with it.
Okay, send your final words. 10 seconds.
Organizations need help. They should make sure that they get good working policies and advice to be able to handle this, so that they do not themselves become victims to suits.
Wow, this has been exciting. We definitely have to do this again sometime in the year, but this has been 5 weeks of discussion on sexual harassment in the workplace and its impact on productivity. This has been Masterclass here on your Superstation. Let me take the opportunity to say a big thank you to my panelists, Senor Ajabing, Labour Consultant, HR Practitioner, Samuel Kwame Boafo, Head HR Cal Bank, William Eastmon, Head People and Culture Function, Barclays. Thank you so much for spending time with us. Next week, we start a completely different area of our discussion, and this is in the area of procurement, public procurement. You're a business, you want to go into procurement, you don't know how to win tenders and all of that. Every time you tender, you lose out. We'll be talking about winning public procurement bids or contracts as a private business. In that discussion, we'll be spending some time with the CEO of the PPA in the person of Mr. Ejinim Boateng Eje. Make a date with us here on the show for this discussion, same time next week. This has been Masterclass here on the Superstation. Thank you for tuning in and listening. My name is Yabanafo. Up next is the News at 2. See you same time next week.
2 o'clock.
Joy Headline News at 2. My name is Aisha Ibrahim. Coming up, minority in Parliament demands full-blown enquiry into the suspension of PDS contract. Supreme Court rules mining leases granted a company associated with brother of former President John Mahama, Ibrahim Mahama, is invalid, void and of no effect. And we'll hear from award-winning international songstress Deborah Cox on what we should expect ahead of the Ghana World Music Festival next week. Let's settle for the details. The minority in Parliament is demanding a full-blown inquiry into the suspension of the PDS contract. Government yesterday suspended the concession agreement after it discovered some material breaches on the part of PDS. Here's Energy Minister John Peter Amewu.
Of the agreement was one of the conditions for exercising the agreement, and so to make sure that the agreement takes effect, because MEDA, as the investing body or the investor, has the responsibility to make sure the agreement is executed. So whatever it takes them to make sure the agreement takes effect from the date that was stipulated.
Meanwhile, PDS insists it acted in good faith despite government's claims it engaged in fraudulent payments. Fifi Kumsen has extracts of a statement signed by the chief executive.
It says PDS wishes to state for the record that it has always acted and will continue to act in good faith at all times. PDS will go through due process by complying with the terms of the transaction agreement executed between it and ECG on one hand and the government of Ghana through the Ministry of Finance on the other hand. PDS also wishes to assure the Ghanaian public that it will not rush to put out any information until it has been sufficiently substantiated in the interest of safeguarding the transaction and the image of Ghana.
The minority insists there must be a full-blown inquiry into the suspension of that contract. The call was made by Minority Leader Haruna Idrisu when he contributed to the budget review.
How come that after signing the agreement, government is announcing a pull-out and saying that ECG should take over? What has happened to the private sector? Not because we demand a full-blown parliamentary inquiry into the matter. And this government itself must hold ourselves. If we didn't conduct ourselves well, we should accept responsibility. When documents come here, we will not thoroughly scrutinize it. We just say approve, 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 because we have numbers. Look at the embarrassment it's causing the economy. Get this agreement. We demand that.
Haruna Idrisu is Minority Leader. The Supreme Court has ruled that mining leases granted a company associated with brother of former President John Mahama, Ibrahim Mahama, is invalid, void and of no effect. The court also held that the lease granted Exxon Cubic did not comply with mandatory statutory provisions of the Minerals and Mining Act and Article 268 of the Constitution. Joy News' editor Fred Smith has details of the court's ruling.
An Accra High Court presided over by Justice Akabuafu in May 2018 ruled that then Lands and Natural Resources Minister John Peter Amewu had no power to revoke the mining license granted to Exxon Cubic to prospect for bauxite. The court quashed the minister's revocation of the license. Justice Buafu also ruled that the company breached several processes in its acquisition of a mining license, a situation that makes it impossible for Exxon Cubic to be deemed to have, quote, a mining right as required by law. Now, Deputy Attorney General Godfred Yeboah-Dame, who believes the ruling was partly in the interest of government, was quick to add that the judge went beyond his original jurisdiction. He therefore issued a writ at the Supreme Court asking that it intervenes and rejects the ruling by Justice Akabuafu.
In a related development, management of Akroma Golds Limited in New Esase in the